So now we're moving into the local development setup. I've created a virtual machine with a fresh install of macOS, and we'll be setting everything up completely from scratch. As developers, we all tend to have different environments. Some of us already have tools and dependencies installed, others might be starting fresh. This walkthrough is meant to work for everyone, even for those who are setting things up for the first time. On the right, you can see VS Code. It's a clean install, no add-ons or extensions beyond what comes by default. On the left, we have Otoshek open in the browser, with our dashboard and deployed project visible. We'll be using VS Code Terminal throughout this tutorial, and following the Otoshek local setup guide, which makes the process straightforward. It's mostly a series of copy and paste steps that anyone can follow. Now, if some of these steps are things you've already completed, feel free to skip ahead, no need to repeat what's already done. This setup shouldn't take too long. I'll trim or speed through quieter sections where the system is working in the background so we can stay focused on the key actions. All right, with that, let's get started. Okay, I already have a tab open with the Otoshek documentation. At the bottom of the sidebar, I'll select Local Configuration, which opens the setup guide we'll be following. Let me scroll down a little to the first step. I'll open the VS Code terminal from the menu. I'll try to avoid using keyboard shortcuts other than copy and paste, so there are no hidden actions. Right now, there's no project open in VS Code. This is exactly what you see when launching it for the first time. All right, the first code block checks if Homebrew is installed. And as you can see, command not found. So we know it's not installed, and we can continue with the next code block that installs it. If you already have Homebrew, you can skip ahead to clone your repo. I enter my password, and the Homebrew installation starts, and I'll speed up this part while it runs. Midway through, I'm asked again for my password, this time for Xcode command line tools. And that's it. Homebrew is installed. Next, we'll run the code block that adds Homebrew to our path, then check if it's working properly. Perfect. We have our Homebrew version showing, which means it's installed correctly. Now let's clone the repository that contains our project. Since it's a private repo, we have to make sure our computer is authenticated with GitHub. If you've already set up authentication, you can skip ahead to cloning. Otherwise, we'll go through authentication using SSH. But first, let's confirm that Git is installed on the system. As you can see, macOS already comes with Git pre-installed, so we can skip the installation step. For authentication, we'll start by generating an SSH key pair. The email in the command is just a label to identify the key layer. It doesn't need to be a real address. I'll leave it as it is since this is a temporary setup. When prompted for the location and passphrase, you can simply press Enter to accept the defaults. Now that the key is generated, let's start the SSH agent and add the key. Done. Next, we'll make this persistent by configuring the system to remember your SSH key and use it automatically when connecting to GitHub. Finally, let's copy the public key so we can add it to GitHub and complete the authentication setup. Now I have my GitHub account opened in this tab. I'll click my profile picture and select Settings. In the sidebar under Access, I'll click SSH and GPG keys, and then I'll select New SSH key. Here I'll paste the public key I copied earlier and give it a descriptive name so I can easily identify it later. Finally, I'll click Add SSH key, and there we go. We can now see the key added and active in the list. Let's jump back to the setup guide and test our SSH connection. We run the command and get a prompt asking to confirm a host. Type yes, then press enter. Perfect. We see you've successfully authenticated, but GitHub does not provide shell access, exactly what we expect. Now it's time to clone the repository. I'll clone it here, but you can first CB into any folder where you want your project to live. That's where the repo will be downloaded. You'll need to edit the command with your actual path, your GitHub username followed by your GitHub repo name. I'll switch to GitHub, open the repo that Otoshek created, and copy the username and repo from the address bar. Back to the terminal, replace that part of the command with your actual repo address, then press enter. Done. We can see the project Otoshek demo is there. Let's return to the setup guide to see the next step. But before continuing, now that we've cloned the project, let's open it in VS Code. When prompted, click Yes, I trust the authors. I'll close a couple of extra windows to keep things tidy. You can now see the project folder structure in the left sidebar. First, I'll turn autosave on so our edits are saved automatically. Then I'll open a new terminal in VS Code and make it a bit larger. Continuing the setup, we'll generate trusted HTTPS certificates so we can run the project locally over HTTPS. This matters because OAuth providers require secure origins for authentication callbacks. Without HTTPS, your login requests will be rejected for security reasons. All right, we'll start by checking whether MakeCert is installed. It isn't, so we'll install it with Homebrew. Next, we'll use MakeCert to install the local certificate authority. It will prompt for your password. Enter it to continue. Great. Now we can generate the certificates. Let's print the certificate paths to the console. Nice, we've got the paths visible. I'll scroll the setup guide a bit so you can see the step we're on. We now need to copy these paths into two places, launch.json and vite.config. You can tell which is which by the file names. The private key path is the one that ends with .key. That's it for certificates. Let's move on and set up the database. Yeah, I'll open a new terminal for this part. First, let's check if PostgreSQL is installed. It's not, so we'll go ahead and install PostgreSQL 17. Next, we'll add it to our path so the system can recognize it. Now let's start configuring the database by setting the database name. You can change this to whatever makes sense for your setup. Then we'll start the PostgreSQL service and verify that it's running. Next, we'll create the superuser called Postgres. Then we'll create the database, and finally, we'll verify that it was created. If there's no output, that means everything is working correctly. Now, let's make sure the project is using the right credentials to connect to the database. We'll go to the Backend folder. Yours might be named differently if you used another name during the build stage in Otoshek. Open the settings.py file, then scroll down to the Databases section. Here, we'll change the name to match the database we created. For me, that's local Otoshek. The user stays as Postgres, and we can remove the password, leaving an empty string since we didn't set one. All right, that's it for the database setup. Let's continue. All right, so I'll open a new terminal tab. Next, let's check if we have Python 3.11 installed. We don't, so let's go ahead and install it. Now we'll create a virtual environment. Make sure you're in the root directory of your project before running the command. Done. We can see the .ven folder created in the directory. Next, let's install all dependencies from the requirements text file. Let's scroll down in the setup guide. Next, we'll apply the database migrations. I'm going to copy only the migrate command since our virtual environment is already active. You can see .venv at the start of the terminal line. Once that's done, we'll create the Django Superuser. This gives us access to the Backend admin panel. I'll enter a username, skip the email, and then set a password. Done. Now let's set up a few environment variables for local development. I'll copy the name of the file we're about to create, then create it at the root of the project, and paste in the template content. Next, I'll grab the striped price IBs from the Otoshek dashboard and replace the placeholder block in the file. Then I'll open our credentials file and copy the Google OAuth and Mailjet values, pasting them into the new .env file. With that done, back to the setup guide. Our next task is to insert the Stripe API key into the database, which means we need to launch the backend server. Before running it, we'll install the Python debugger extension in VS Code. Menu bar, Code, Settings, Extensions. Search for Python debugger, Microsoft. Click Install. Now we're ready. I'll press F5 to run the backend. A new terminal opens and the server is running. I'll copy the admin URL from the setup guide and paste it into my browser. Under Authentication, I'll log in using the Superuser credentials I created a few moments ago in the terminal. Once inside, I'll scroll to the DJ Stripe section and select API keys. In the top right corner, I'll click Add API key. Next, I'll open our variables file, copy the Stripe API key, and paste it into the secret key field in the admin panel. Quick save, and there it is. Our key is now stored in the database. Scrolling down in the sidebar, I'll select Webhook endpoints. From the Actions dropdown, choose Sync all instances for all API keys. Click Go, then Validate. You'll notice the Azure URL of your deployed app appearing in the list. That means it's properly connected. Back in the setup guide, the next step is to fetch the webhook secret from the Stripe portal. I'll open Stripe in a new tab and sign in. In the search bar, I'll type Webhooks, then select Webhooks from the results. In the Webhook endpoints list, there's just one. I'll select it. On the new page, down on the right, I'll click the eye icon to reveal the secret, then the copy button, and finally paste that value into our .env file under Stripe Webhook secret. Back in the setup guide, the next step is to sync our database with Stripe. I'll open a new terminal and paste the sync command. Now let's check if Node.js is installed. It's not, so we'll go ahead and install it. Once that's done, we'll cd into the front-end directory and install all front-end dependencies. Finally, let's launch the front end. Perfect. We can see the front-end URL printed in the terminal. I'll hold Command and click it. It opens right in the browser. And that's it. We've completed the entire local setup. You've installed all the core dependencies, configured HTTPS certificates, set up PostgreSQL, created your environment file, and connected both the backend and front end to your deployed project. Everything you've done locally mirrors your production environment. So what you see here is exactly what's running in the cloud. That means you can now develop, test, and push updates confidently. Every local change can be committed and deployed through your CI/CD pipeline in just a few clicks. Let's quickly verify that everything is working as expected. I'll open the pricing page, and there it is. All our subscription tiers loading perfectly, confirming the Stripe integration is connected. Now back to the home page. Our project is live, secure, and fully synced between local and production. You now have a complete professional-grade setup, ready for real development work.